The ocean covers more than 70% of our world, and we've explored less than 5. Down there, in the crushing dark, are places untouched by light and sounds no one can explain. Tonight, you'll hear 5 true encounters from the depths. Stories of divers, sailors, and rescuers who saw things they'll never forget. These are the horrors that waited beneath the surface. The lights beneath the reef. I've been a recreational diver for nearly 15 years. My name's Daniel, I'm 33, and I live in Clearwater, Florida. Most weekends I spend underwater, not for work, just because it's the only place I ever feel truly quiet inside. The water has a kind of peace to it. But one night dive 2 summers ago changed that completely. I haven't been able to go near the ocean after what I saw under that reef. It was late June, around 9:45 p.m. My friend Erica and I had planned a casual night dive near an old coral ridge about 2 miles off the coast. The water was calm, visibility was decent, and the moonlight cut through the surface enough that we barely needed our torches. We anchored my small boat and geared up, descending slowly into that deep blue silence. At about 20 feet down, everything was serene, fish gliding between soft corals, the occasional flash of a stingray disappearing into sand. The reef was alive in ways it never was during the day. Tiny bioluminescent plankton drifted around us like glowing dust. It was beautiful, peaceful. I remember thinking how lucky I was to see something so pure. We reached the ridge at roughly 10:10 p.m. Erica was a little ahead, scanning a section of coral for lionfish. I stayed behind, adjusting my camera housing. That's when I noticed something odd. A faint pulsing blue light deeper below us. It wasn't Erica's torch. She was well above me, her beam white and steady. This light flickered slowly, almost like a heartbeat, and it was coming from much deeper, at least another 40 feet down, where the reef sloped into a sandy trench. At first, I thought it might be a lost diver's light, or maybe some kind of underwater equipment someone had dropped. But the pulse, it felt almost organic. I signaled Erica and pointed down. She gave a quick thumbs down, the universal descend gesture, and I nodded. I should have left it at that, but curiosity can drown reason faster than water fills lungs. We descended into colder water. My dive computer beeped softly. 60 feet, 70, 80. The reef's colors dimmed to gray-blue shadows replaced by sand and scattered rocks. The pulsing glow grew brighter, now clearly moving, shifting slowly across the trench floor, like something crawling. At 92 feet, I could see it clearly. 5 or 6 distinct orbs of light, perfectly spherical, floating just above the sand. They weren't attached to anything I could see, just drifting in formation. Every few seconds they dim, then flare up again in perfect unison. The weirdest thing was how steady the water felt. No current, no movement. Yet the lights hovered exactly in place, as if the sea itself was holding its breath. Erica tapped my shoulder, pointing toward one of the orbs. It had drifted closer. Within seconds, it was only a few meters away. I raised my torch, and the beam seemed to just vanish when it touched the glow. Like it absorbed the light, then I saw it, or thought I did. Behind the glowing spheres in the darkness, something moved. It was massive. I caught only an outline, a shape curving upward, smooth and pale like the underside of a whale. But it wasn't shaped like any animal I knew. It had symmetry, almost human symmetry. 2 long, thin shapes extending like arms. My pulse was hammering so loud I could hear it in my regulator. I grabbed Erica's wrist and signaled to ascend. She nodded, until one of the lights suddenly darted upward, stopping just inches from her mask. Her entire face lit up in that eerie blue. She froze. I swear I could see something inside the orb, like a pupil staring back at her. It wasn't a light. It was an eye. Then the sound hit us in a low-frequency hum, not through the water, but inside our skulls. My vision blurred. My dive computer spiked erratically. I saw Erica clutch her head, bubbles streaming violently from her regulator. The lights started moving, fast now, swirling around us in a spiral. I felt my chest tighten like I couldn't breathe, even though my tank was full. I remember grabbing her hand and kicking upward. I don't even know how long we swam. The light chased us, flickering in and out of existence. The hum grew louder until it was all I could hear, like metal grinding inside my bones. And then all at once, silence. Darkness. When I looked back down, everything was gone. Just the reef, just black water. We broke the surface at 10:37 p.m., gasping. The night was still and empty. My boat's anchor light was the only thing visible. Erica ripped off her mask, her eyes wide and bloodshot. Neither of us said a word. We climbed aboard and sat there in silence for almost 10 minutes, just listening to the waves. When we checked our dive logs later, both computers had glitched at exactly 10:29 p.m., the same minute that hum started. The depth reading spiked to 140 feet, then froze, even though neither of us went below 95. The files on my camera? Corrupted. Every photo, every video, unreadable. Erica hasn't gone diving since that night. She moved inland. Says she doesn't even like driving over bridges anymore. Me? I tried to rationalize it. Bioluminescent algae, deep-sea current, hallucination from nitrogen narcosis. But then 3 weeks later I went back out there. Alone. Just to see if it had all been in my head. Same reef, same time of night. Around 10:20 p.m. my boat's sonar started picking up motion beneath the hull. Slow rhythmic pulses, exactly 5 beats apart. Like a heartbeat. I turned off the engine and looked over the edge. The water was completely dark. But about 20 feet down, I saw them again. Those same blue lights rising slowly toward me. That's when I heard it. The hum. Not through the water this time. Through the metal of the boat. I left my gear, started the motor, and didn't stop until I hit the shore. I told a local marine biologist about it a few days later. He said that section of reef isn't even natural. Apparently it's built over an old World War II wreck. The trench we thought we saw might actually be part of a sunken structure. A submarine or an experimental craft. Nobody's allowed to dive near it now. But sometimes, on still nights, people on the pier swear they see blue lights under the water, drifting in slow circles. Always around the same time. Always right where we were. I don't dive anymore. And when I stand on the shore after dark, I swear I can still feel that hum inside my skull, like something deep beneath the reef remembers me. The Drowned Hotel. My name's Oliver. I'm 29, a freelance underwater photographer based in Sydney. Most of my work involves documenting wrecks and marine life for magazines or conservation groups. But 2 years ago, I got a private offer I'll never forget. It was from a man named Richard Baines, a marine architect who wanted me to photograph a newly discovered structure off the coast of Queensland, near an area called Coral Haven Trench. He said it was a sunken hotel from the 1980s, a luxury experiment that had been partially built offshore but never finished after a cyclone hit. It had supposedly been forgotten and rediscovered by accident. I didn't believe him at first. There aren't many places where something that big could disappear. But when he wired me half the payment up front and sent coordinates, I figured it was worth at least one dive. We left the marina around 6 a.m. just before sunrise. It was me, Richard, and a local diver named Marcus who was helping guide the descent. The sea was calm, went too calm in hindsight. I remember feeling a strange heaviness in the air as we got closer to the site. No birds, no waves, not even the sound of wind. We anchored above the coordinates around 8:15 a.m., about 4 miles offshore. When I looked down, the water had that strange, opaque blue-green tint, the kind that looks beautiful from afar but hides everything below. At 8:40, we went under. The descent was uneventful at first, 20 feet. T40. The light dimmed, the sea turned colder, and a fine mist of sand hung in the water like fog. At 60 feet, I saw it, the top of a metal dome, perfectly round, half buried in silt. As we got closer, more structure came into view. Curved hallways, balconies, skeletal beams. The shape wasn't random. It was architectural. It really was a hotel. But here's the thing. It didn't look destroyed. There was no obvious wreckage, no torn metal. The structure was intact, like it had just sunk. We entered through a shattered glass corridor that led into what must have been the lobby. The glass doors were wide open, and inside the world was frozen in silence. The floor was still tiled, faded marble overrun with coral and seaweed. Fish drifted lazily past abandoned chairs. There was even an old reception counter, its wood warped but still standing. Behind it, a sign faintly read, "Welcome to Azure Dreams Resort." I remember exhaling through my regulator and watching the bubbles float up, thinking, this place shouldn't be real. We split up. Marcus stayed near the entrance, and I followed Richard down a hallway that led to what used to be the guest suites. The deeper we went, the stranger it got. I noticed that certain doors were closed completely, sealed by pressure or silt, while others had drifted open. Inside the open rooms, I saw furniture, luggage, uneven shoes. Everything looked preserved, like the water had been too respectful to disturb it. At 9:10 a.m., Richard gestured for me to follow him into one of the suites. He pointed to a mural on the wall, a faded painting of waves under a full moon. It was oddly beautiful, almost glowing in the filtered light. I raised my camera to take a shot. That's when something moved across the hallway behind me. It wasn't Marcus. The figure was too smooth, too slow. A human silhouette, pale, almost translucent, drifting from one room to the next. I turned fully, trying to focus my torchlight, but the beam hit nothing. Just dust and plankton. When I looked back at Richard, he was staring at the same hallway, frozen. His eyes were wide behind the mask. He raised his hand, shaking slightly, and pointed upward. There was another one, floating just above us. At first I thought it was debris, a curtain or cloth, but then I saw its face, or what was left of one. The features were distorted, stretched by time and pressure. It had long hair that waved like seaweed, and its jaw was slightly open, as if caught mid-scream. Richard dropped his flashlight. The sound echoed like a thunderclap in the silence. That motion seemed to wake the thing. It turned its head, slowly, deliberately, and faced us. I swear on my life, its eyes opened. The sockets were black, empty, but I felt its gaze. The water grew instantly colder. My fingers went numb on the camera. Then it began to move, not swim, but glide, twisting its body in ways that didn't make sense, like gravity didn't apply to it down there. I backed up, nearly tripping over a fallen chair. Richard was shaking his head, frantically signaling to retreat. I grabbed his arm and pushed him toward the exit. As we swam back into the hallway, more figures appeared. 3, maybe 4. All drifting from the closed rooms. Some wore what looked like guest uniforms, others casual clothes that floated in slow motion. Their mouths hung open, bubbles of decay seeping out like sighs. I kicked as hard as I could, but it felt like the water had turned to syrup. The whole corridor seemed to tilt downward, like the hotel itself was dragging us deeper. My heartbeat pounded in my mask, loud and metallic. At 9:27 a.m., we burst through the shattered glass entryway and shot toward the surface. Marcus was nowhere in sight. I looked down once, just once, and saw something I can't forget. The figures were at the doorway, watching us go. Perfectly still, their faces pale against the dark interior, hair waving like weeds. And between them a soft yellow light flickered, as if the lobby's old chandelier had come alive again. When we broke the surface, Richard ripped off his mask and screamed Marcus's name. But there was no answer. The rope line we'd left near the anchor was frayed, cut clean through. We waited on the boat for hours, scanning the waves. Marcus never surfaced. The Coast Guard searched for 2 days and found nothing. No body, no equipment, not even bubbles from a leak. Just silence. Richard never filed a report. He wired me the remaining payment and told me to destroy every photo I'd taken. But I didn't. I kept the memory card. The strange thing is, most of the photos are blank, static gray, except one. The very last frame before we fled. It's a wide shot of the lobby. And in the far corner, almost hidden behind the counter, there's a reflection in the glass wall. A woman. Long hair floating upward, mouth open. But behind her, you can see another face reflected in the same pane. Marcus's. Except it's inside the hotel, not outside where he should have been. Sometimes, late at night, I open that photo and zoom in. Every time I do, the reflection looks slightly different. Her head turns a little more toward the camera. I haven't been underwater since, but 2 months ago a research crew went diving near Coral Haven and reported seeing strange lights under the sand. The same coordinates, give or take a few meters. One of the divers described it on the news. It looked like a hotel with the light still on. The thing that knocked on the hull, my name's Nathan Cole, and for 5 years I worked as a marine acoustics technician aboard small research submarines. Most people think deep-sea work is all high-tech exploration and adventure. In reality, it's endless hours of humming machinery, darkness, and silence so thick it presses on your chest. You start hearing things that aren't there. At least that's what I used to tell myself. Until the night I learned otherwise. It happened in August of 2019, off the coast of Nova Scotia. Our mission was simple: a 3-man crew recording whale communication patterns near the continental shelf. The sub was called the Selene, a small 2-compartment research craft rated for depths of around 2,000 feet. We launched at 10 RPM, descending slowly into pitch-black water. The captain was Harris, a veteran diver in his 50s. The sonar operator was Lydia, quiet, meticulous, and good at what she did. I handled the acoustic sensors, the hydrophones, data logs, and recording equipment. For the first few hours, it was routine. We drifted along the shelf, logging low-frequency calls that echoed for miles. Every so often, Lydia would pick up distant clicks or groans. Maybe a sperm whale, maybe something else. Down there, sound carries differently. Everything feels closer than it really is. By 2 a.m., Harris called for a drift break. We shut the engines down to conserve power and sat in silence, lights dimmed. Outside the viewport, there was nothing, just the occasional flicker of bioluminescence drifting by like dust motes. Then, at 2:27 a.m., the first sound came, a dull thud, somewhere on the lower hull. It wasn't loud, but in that kind of silence, it felt enormous. Lydia looked up immediately. Harris frowned. We all listened. Nothing. Just the steady ticking of the sonar, then thud. Again. This time, higher up the hull, near the viewport. I leaned forward, half expecting to see a rock or debris floating by. Nothing but darkness, Harris muttered. Probably a fish bump. Happens all the time. But Lydia shook her head. That wasn't a bump, she whispered. It echoed. She was right. The impact had a hollow resonance, like knuckles on metal. At 2:30 a.m., another sound followed. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, thud, 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 then silence. We froze. Harris reached for the external lights and flipped them on. The beams cut through maybe 10 feet of murky water before dissolving into blackness. Nothing out there. No movement. But the knocks continued, softer now, moving slowly along the hull, circling us. I switched on the hydrophones to record it. The playback came through the speakers, muffled but clear. When the knocks stopped, there was something else. A low rhythmic hum, almost like a voice underwater. Not whale song. Not mechanical. Just a tone that rose and fell with deliberate cadence. Lydia leaned closer to her console. That's not natural, she said, her voice trembling. Harris exhaled sharply, maybe to hide his own nerves. We'll ascend 20 meters, get clear of the ridge. He started the thrusters. The sub shuddered and began to rise. For a moment, everything was normal again. Just the mechanical hum of ascent, the steady green blip of sonar. Then halfway through the climb, the sub jolted violently. Something had struck us hard. The whole cabin shook. Equipment rattled off the shelves. Alarms started flashing. Harris yelled, "What the hell was that?" The sonar flared with static, then cleared, and there it was. A large moving mass, maybe 15 meters long, circling beneath us. No clear shape, just a dense, irregular echo that didn't match any marine creature in the database. It's following, Lydia whispered. The lights outside flickered as the sub strained upward. Then saw another hit, this one from above. The metal groaned. The viewport creaked, and then came the knocking again, right against the glass. Slow, deliberate, like it knew we were inside. Thud. 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 I'll never forget what I saw next. Through the murky beam of our exterior light, something pressed against the viewport. A hand? Or something shaped like one. 5 long digits, too thin, too smooth. Pale, almost translucent skin stretched tight. Veins like threads beneath it. It stayed there for maybe 3 seconds. Then it slid downward, leaving a faint smear across the glass before disappearing into blackness. Lydia was sobbing quietly. Harris just stared, hands frozen on the controls. We ascended as fast as we dared, ignoring the pressure warnings. I kept watching the sonar. The mass was still beneath us, matching our movement exactly. At 2:41 a.m. it stopped, just vanished from the display. We reached the surface at 2:55, gasping, shaking, drenched in cold sweat. The ocean was dead calm. The stars above felt blinding after that darkness. When we climbed out, the hull had deep scratches along one side, long, uneven marks that didn't match any known equipment damage. The metal around the viewport was cold, like it had been refrigerated. We reported a mechanical incident. The lab reviewed the sonar logs, dismissed the recordings as interference. But when I checked the hydrophone file later, the audio was still there. You can hear the knocks clearly. Then the hum. But if you listen closely, really closely, you can hear something else under the hum. It's faint but unmistakable. A voice. A man's voice. It repeats a phrase 3 times, distorted by water and distance. I had to amplify it to make out the words. It says, "Is anybody there?" After that, the file cuts out. Harris quit diving a month later. Lydia transferred to land-based analysis. I stayed for a while. But last winter, during another descent near the same trench, our sonar picked up a rhythmic tapping pattern at 2:30 a.m. exactly. Same interval. Same depth, only this time it didn't come from below. It came from behind us, from the direction of the open ocean. When I boosted the gain, I could hear it again. Faint, almost pleading. "Is anybody there?" The voice in the radio. My name's Ethan Rowe, and I've worked as a Coast Guard radio operator in Maine for nearly 12 years. Most nights on duty are quiet. Static, weather updates, the occasional fishing boat checking in. The kind of monotony that makes you half forget the ocean can be the loneliest place on Earth. But one night, February 19th, 2021, around 2:30 a.m., I picked up a signal I wish I never had. I was working the night shift alone at the Port Camden Coast Guard station. It's a small building near the docks with a panoramic view of the harbor and 2 radio consoles humming softly in the dark. Outside, a nor'easter was rolling in. You could hear the wind whistling through the cracks and waves slapping against the pier. At around 2:17, the distress frequency started crackling. A weak voice cut through the static. "Mayday, mayday, this is the Mariner's call. Coordinates 43.2 north, 68.4 west. We're taking on water." I froze. The name, Mariner's Call, was familiar. I checked the logs. Sure enough, the Mariner's Call had been a mid-sized fishing vessel, lost at sea in 1983. All 7 crew were declared dead after it vanished during a storm near those same coordinates. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a prank, maybe a boat reusing the same name. Still, I responded, voice steady but heart racing. "This is Camden Coast Guard, Mariner's Call. Please repeat your message." Static. Then faintly, "We're taking on water. Need assistance? Engine's dead." The voice sounded distant, hollow, like it was being played through layers of distortion. But what really unnerved me was the tone. Calm. Almost resigned. Not the panic you'd expect from a sinking ship. I asked again for confirmation. "Mariner's Call. Say again your coordinates." There was a pause. Then a soft crackle followed by a second voice. This one female whispering, barely audible. "Tell them we're still here." My skin crawled. The hair on my arm stood up despite the heat from the console. I repeated the call twice, 3 times, until finally the signal dropped. The channel went dead. At 2:31 it came back. This time there was only static and what sounded like faint weeping in the background, like someone crying underwater. I recorded the transmission and sent the data to the regional command center. Protocol required we dispatch a vessel, even if it was probably a hoax. The rescue boat, CG-107, launched from the main pier at 3:05 a.m. The captain, Lieutenant Graves, kept an open line with me. For the first half hour, everything was normal. Rough seas, poor visibility. Then around 3:40, his voice changed. "Ethan, are you sure about those coordinates?" "Affirmative, Lieutenant." "Why?" "Because we're here, and there's nothing. No radar contact, no debris. But the sonar's picking something up, like a large mass just below us." I asked for a reading. 40 meters down, he said. "Stationary. Could be a reef." Then there was a long silence. "Wait," he said quietly. "We've got movement. Rising fast." The line crackled with interference, then spewed a noise I'll never forget. A high-pitched metallic screech followed by a hollow clang, like something striking the hull, shouting, static. Then, "Jesus Christ, it's a ship, it's right below us." The transmission cut off. I tried calling back, but the channel was dead. 10 minutes later, the radar showed CG-107 moving rapidly back toward shore. When they docked at 4:25 a.m., the entire crew looked pale, shaken. Graves pulled me aside and said, "We saw it." I asked what he meant. He said that through the waves and mist, they saw a dark shape rise halfway out of the water. A ship. Old, rusted, its hull cracked and covered in algae. He swore he saw the nameplate illuminated by lightning, Mariner's Call. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it sank back under. No bubbles, no debris. The Coast Guard launched a full investigation the next morning. Divers searched the area. They found nothing, no wreck, no sonar anomaly, no evidence a ship had been there. I was questioned about the radio call. The official report said it was likely atmospheric interference causing a ghost signal. Apparently, radio waves can bounce between the ionosphere and ocean surface, sometimes carrying old broadcasts across decades. But here's the thing. I've reviewed the recording dozens of times since then. The transmission isn't an old tape. You can hear the present tense in their voices. The sound of waves slapping metal, the creak of ropes, real-time feedback. And near the end of the recording, just before the static cuts off completely, you can faintly hear something else, almost too quiet to notice unless you amplify it. It's a whisper, layered under the noise, repeating a single phrase over and over. The water's too cold. Tell them we're still here. 3 days later, one of the CG-107 crewmen, a rookie named Mark Leland, didn't show up for duty. They found his truck abandoned by the harbor. On the seat was his radio, tuned to the distress frequency. When they powered it on, it was already broadcasting. Just faint static. And then after a few seconds, a man's voice, it said, "Mayday, Mayday. This is the Mariner's Call. We're taking on water." The timestamp on that recording? 2:30 a.m. Every February since, the same signal comes through. Faint, broken, always the same message. We log it, record it, and every year, the file cuts off at the exact same moment. And sometimes when I'm sitting alone on shift, I think I can hear that whisper again, under the static, just low enough to make me doubt it. Tell them we're still here. The girl floating in the fog, my name's Caleb Brooks, and I've worked as a commercial fisherman for most of my life. I grew up in a small coastal town called Port Hazel, up in northern Oregon. The kind of place where the ocean isn't a view, it's part of who you are. My dad fished these waters before me, and I took over his old trawler after he passed. You spend enough nights out there and you learn to respect the sea. It's quiet one second and monstrous the next. But what I saw one foggy morning 3 years ago still keeps me awake some nights. Because it wasn't a storm or a shadow or a trick of the mind. It was something alive. It was June 11th, 2022, about 4:10 a.m. I was about 8 miles off the coast, alone on my trawler, Hazel Jane. I'd gone out earlier than usual because a fog bank was rolling in, and I wanted to get my nets down before visibility dropped. By 4:30, the world had gone white. Thick, suffocating fog swallowed everything. I couldn't see more than 15 feet past the bow. The water was dead still, not a ripple except from my boat. I killed the engine to save fuel and just listened. The dull slap of waves, the creak of the hull, the faint echo of gulls somewhere far beyond the mist. Then I heard it. A faint splash. Not close, but not far either. I leaned over the side, squinting into the fog. The light from my deck lamp didn't go far. Just a cone of pale yellow fading into gray. But I could swear I saw movement out there, something bobbing. At first I thought it was driftwood or a buoy, but as it drifted closer I realized it wasn't an object. It was a person, a girl. She was floating upright in the water, long dark hair fanning out around her, face pale as paper. I remember whispering "Jesus Christ" under my breath. She looked young, maybe late teens, early 20s, and completely still. I grabbed my boat hook and tried to maneuver closer. "Hey," I shouted. "You okay?" No response. When I got within 10 feet, my stomach turned. Her eyes were open, staring straight ahead, unfocused. Her lips were bluish, her skin bloated and pale. But she wasn't drifting. She was standing upright in the water, motionless, like her feet were resting on something just below the surface. The fog thickened, swallowing the horizon. The air smelled different now, not salty but metallic, like wet iron. My instinct screamed to turn back, but I couldn't. Something about her stillness felt wrong, unnatural. I reached out with the hook to try and pull her closer. Maybe she was barely alive, maybe shock. The metal tip brushed her shoulder. She moved, not a twitch or flinch. She turned her head slowly, deliberately, her eyes locked on mine. They weren't lifeless anymore. They were glassy and dark, reflecting my deck light like mirrors. Her mouth opened slightly, and I swear I heard her say something, though her lips barely moved. It was a whisper, carried just enough by the fog to reach me. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. The voice was flat, hollow, but undeniably real. Before I could respond, the boat jolted, and hard enough to make me stumble. Something had struck the hull from underneath. Then again, heavier. The whole trawler rocked like it had hit a submerged log. I looked down into the water beside the girl. It wasn't clear anymore. It had turned dark, like ink swirling upward. Bubbles rose in slow streams, and I swear I saw shapes moving below her. Not fish, not shadows. Hands. Pale, colorless hands reaching upward, grabbing at her legs, at the water itself. She didn't react. She just stared at me, still whispering, though I couldn't make out the words now, muffled like underwater speech. I backed away, heart pounding. I started the engine and threw the throttle forward. The boat lurched ahead through the fog. I didn't look back until I was 100 yards out. When I finally did, she was gone. No ripple, no sign she'd ever been there. But the smell lingered, that metallic tang, like blood and salt. I radioed the Coast Guard around 5:05 a.m., reported what I'd seen. They told me to stay put, said they'd send a rescue vessel. By the time they arrived an hour later, the fog had lifted. Clear skies, calm water, no body, no trace. They logged it as a false sighting, probably fatigue or fog mirage. But here's the thing. 2 days later, a report came in from another trawler about 3 miles from where I'd been. Same time, just before dawn. They said they saw a young woman floating in the fog, motionless. When the Coast Guard arrived, they found nothing again. I tried to forget it. But a month later, curiosity got the better of me. I looked up old maritime records for disappearances near Port Hazel. I found something that made my blood run cold. Back in 1989, a passenger ferry called the Silver Maiden sank off the same coast during heavy fog. Among the missing was a girl named Lydia Barnes, 19 years old. The recovered survivors said she was last seen standing on deck, staring overboard, right before the ship went under. No trace of her body was ever found. Here's the part that keeps me awake. The newspaper photo of her, the one they used in the missing persons report, shows her standing beside her parents at the pier. Smiling, and her eyes, dark, glassy, too reflective, exactly the same as the girl I saw. I sold the Hazel Jane the next month. Haven't been out to sea since. But sometimes early in the morning, when the fog rolls in from the bay, I can hear faint knocking on my window at home, gentle, rhythmic. And if I listen closely beneath the wind, I can hear a woman's voice, whispering from somewhere out on the water, "You shouldn't be here."